Hi, welcome back to Storytime Book. I appreciate you being back. We're on the final stretch of Gods and More Gods. We'll do 2 chapters today, and then we'll do another two. The next one, those will be really short, and then we're finished with this book. So the next book we'll be reading will be Shoe Man, about my shoe-based detective. So it'll be interesting to see what you think of that one. So today's chapters, first one is Word Gets Around. You wouldn't do that to us, would you? The man looked up at Peter with tears in his eyes. Peter was at a loss as to what the man was talking about. Wouldn't do what? Abandon us on that. The man pointed at the distant planet. Peter put a comforting hand on the man's shoulder. The warmth flowed from his hand through the man's body, relaxing him. Of course not. When the planets are close enough for travel, one or two of us will be going along to ensure that everything is taken care of and that you'll be all safe. The man seemed reassured and went back to talk to the group, discussing the rumors that had come in with the visiting people from Gladys's continent. Word was spreading all over, and questions were being asked of the gods. How would they decide who goes? Would the gods really forsake the people on Earth to travel to the other world? What would happen to those who prayed to the gods who left? The gods decided to meet again to address these and other pressing issues. Down opened the meeting. I think we're all hearing the same rumors or variations of them. Somehow the people have gotten it into their heads that we're going to pick people at random, break up families, sending them off without God representations, and leave them to fend for themselves. No protection and no caring if they live or die. Heads were nodding from all. They had all heard approximately the same thing. Last stood, it seems somehow the rumors have started from my section. I don't know if this was something that was started while Karen was in charge or simply lack of communication on our part. But I'm trying to put a stop to this nonsense. I've spoken to the leaders of both my cities and told them to stop the rumors. They've been told that one or more of us will travel with the ship and remain on planet. We can pop back and forth if need be. After all, the people leaving will only be a few thousand miles and are ready to be trained as much as possible. We're just there for unforeseen possibilities. She sat down with a finality that made the other god smile. Peter leaned back in his chair. You know, we ought to decide who's going to on this magic carpet ride. Don surprised everyone by offering to go. I'd like to take the opportunity to restart again. By going, I can do things better now that I have a clear head and heart. It's not like we're going to be separated forever. We're still linked up by prayers and can even meet in the mountain home or club. Anyone care to join me? Peter considered it, but felt he might want to wait until the population grew larger. For a while, one god would be enough, and two would be overkill. The others agreed. Don nodded his approval. I think Peter's got it right. I'll get things going, and if needed, I call for assistance, and put on their hand and swore to always be there for each other. The gods broke up and went home. Don went to tell his people that he was going to be the god going, and anyone who wanted to join him was welcome. He would meet them on Launch Island to ensure that everything was for preparation of the move went smoothly. He assured them that once he left, the other gods would check in often and ensure things were going well. They were more than welcome to pray to any of the other gods of their choosing. In case of extreme need, he could always be reached through prayer, and he would return to deal with the emergency. Last met with the people who were working on creating a communication device. She was amused to see they were beginning with 2 cups and string. On one end, they had a roll of paper and a pen attached to the paper cup. When one person spoke into the opposite end, it created vibrations that the pen marked off on the rolling paper. By working to understand the vibrations, they developed a means of transmitting them both manually and through the air. Well, now communication was faster than ever. People began to talk with their neighbors and friends on other continents. Word of accomplishment spread and were incorporated into works of others. Advancements were happening at a lightning speed. The gods were pleased for the most part. What they were not pleased about was that the rumors were suddenly being spread at an alarming speed. So, as it might, through their leaders, it was clear the rumors persisted. It was time they took on the communications themselves and broadcast to everyone. In all the continents, they had created writing. While not all were identical, they were similar enough that they could be read by the residents and visitors. Items of interest were sent out in flyers or modest newspapers. The guys decided to insert items into these papers for distribution. Each dictated a letter to the editor of their largest paper and asked to be sent out for a month daily. I've said it before and I say again that having been spirits and previously humans allowed these gods to have a unique understanding of the human condition. It was therefore their greatest strength, but it was also their biggest weakness. They were unable to think as gods. Had they considered it, they would have simply planted the information in everyone's mind that they were benevolent and no one would be forced from their home, that Don would be accompanying them to the new world where they're to be their sole god until the population grew larger, and that the other gods would be available to Don's people remaining on Earth should assistance be needed. Instead, they used a newspaper letter to the editor column. Opposing articles were placed in the same papers, which cast doubts on the validity of the letters and their authorship. The article explained that surely a god would have a more expeditious method of communication to all than placing an ad in the paper. This was not the way of gods, so the opposite must be true. People began to doubt the sincerity of the gods. They felt that these gods were not omnipotent beings, but simply people at a higher level. They felt that to offer a subpar god reverence was a waste of time and energy. They had quickly forgotten how these same subpar gods had rescued them from Charon's tyranny. They forgot all about the loving care they had bestowed on the people. People now considered that traveling to the new earth a waste of time and resources and ceased putting the ship together. In the office of the overgods, they saw that the new gods were no longer receiving reverence and were becoming concerned. From the reports, they also saw that the progress so fast and complete was now in danger of being halted. Fred and Dio were sitting in the office getting more and more worried by the moment. The reports coming in did nothing to lift their spirits either. The gods were being ignored, were getting weaker every time they used their powers. Without replenishment, they would eventually become no better than the people they watched over. You and Fred were going to go down to the earth or bring the gods to the facility, but were prevented from doing so by the universal God. Fred was sitting in his chair. Dio was wandering around the facility and trying to find something amusing to put him in a better mood. Not finding anything, he went to the office and confronted Fred. Fred, old bean, we came so close. It's funny that the one thing that makes them almost perfect gods, their humanity, is what's holding them back. They just don't know how to induce that sort of awestruck reverence that most of the old gods could inspire. Fred agreed. If they had had more experience, they might have gone there. He slammed his fist on the desk and groaned. We came so damned close. Rising, he looked around his office and wondered who would occupy it when he and Dio were demoted. Putting his arm around his longtime friend, he patted Dio on the shoulder. Hell, let's head off to the club. We may not be able to visit it much longer. In the club, Berthold welcomed them warmly, offering them any service they desired. They thanked him, but said perhaps later. For the moment, they were just going to walk around and admire it. In the gym, Dionysus told how Hercules tossed down through the hoop and how Ash blasted the ceiling trying to make some light. Sitting by the ocean pool, they created sandcastles and sculptures. Berthold quietly set up a picnic lunch as they created intricate sculptures by hand. Several of these sculptures were shrunk and solidified at Berthold's request and placed behind the bar. Wandering in every room brought back memories from 200 iterations since the beginning of time. The club was still beautiful and a fitting place for gods, but it seemed cold and barren now. What had once seemed peaceful now seemed almost frightening in its barren grandeur. Seeing at the bar, Fred looked over a portion of the contract he had signed. The overgod listed below accepts the contract to populate two Earths at the point of conjunction, and further accept that trade will be conducted between both planets. Failure to compete this will mean termination of the terms of office and the reduction of rank from overgod to that of minor god. The men decided to head back to their apartment and take a case of Old Wolf's whiskey with them. What was the point of worrying about what couldn't be helped? Berthold handed over the case and two thermoses. The thermoses held a restorative in case of necessity from overindulgence. He had heard all and commiserated with them, hoping that things might turn out better than they expected. In fact, he was determined to do what he could to ensure it did. Soon after the Ogrettes left the club, the Earth Gods arrived. Berthold welcomed them with graciousness and warmth. The fire in the fireplace seemed more relaxing, more inviting than before. The meal he prepared was even more sumptuous, and the wine beyond compare. In their rooms were vases of flowers, both exotic and plain. The gods were almost in tears at all they were going to be losing, not just the club or the amenities, but the love they had received from their people for a time, the warm glow that came from prayers given in gratitude. They would miss being in a position to finally do good works that benefit hundreds of thousands. Plus, they would miss Berthold's warmth and care and attention. Being in the club recharged them, and for a while they could feel the warmth and surge of power from being at full capacity. When they returned to the earth, that power would be depleted quickly since they would continue to aid people even if they received nothing in return. They had made a commitment to them and would fulfill their duties. During their stay for 2 days, they decided on doing something for Berthold. They asked for a glass from the bar, and each transferred a portion of their godly powers into the glass. Les took the glass to Berthold, with the others following. We brought you something to drink. We brought you something, beg your pardon. We brought you something to drink this time. She chuckled and handed the glass over. Berthold was so shaken at being offered something that he almost spilt the beverage. He slowly drained the glass, and his eyes grew wide as a surge of godly essence filled his being. In their eyes, Berthold was as much caring God as they were, and now he was as close to an equal as was possible. With tears all around, they hugged and thanked him for his continued care. He stammered thanks and remembered he had something for them. It was a paper Fred had tossed outlining his contract. You might want to look this over. I think it might hold the key to your retaining yours, Fred's and Dionysus's positions. They took the paper with thanks and left for Gladys's office. Let's do it all. Second chance. Seated around the conference table, the guys tried to work out a plan of action. With limited resources of godly energy, they had to work carefully. Donna was looking over the contract Fred had signed. Berthold had said that there might be something in it that was a solution to their own and their boss's mutual problem. Not seeing that anything that could help, he passed it around and went to look out the window. A man was in the center of a large group of followers holding court. Opening the window, he could hear the man's voice amplified. This was the leader of Glass's other city. Dressed in working men's clothes, he was not a prepossessing sight. He spoke in ringing tones and was emphatic in his actions. One moment. He was preaching the need to reach out to the stars. He talked of the courage and dignity in building a new world from scratch. He spoke of it as a chance for man and gods to build a relationship together again. The people heard and some cheered, but it seemed they were only paying him the courtesy of listening while waiting for the other speaker. Seeing that his words were falling on deaf ears, he solemnly left the stage. The people began chanting for the speaker they really wanted. The speaker was splendidly robed, and his face was beautiful to behold. To Don, it seemed to be carved from marble. A moment later, and he realized it was a mask. The man's voice might have been filtered by the mass into a sweetness and richness that held the people enthralled. He was repeating a well worn tirade against the gods and their plans. He was talking about destroying the island and the gods had made for the transportees. Destroy the ship's components, the launch pad, the control room. These things did nothing to further their survival, and if they remained, there was the chance that the gods could still force the transfer of people they had planned on. The people were shouting, "Hell no, we won't go," while stomping their feet so hard the ground shook. The man stood with arms outstretched, its waves of acclamation and accolades flowed around him. The air from thousands of waving hands stirred a breeze, blowing out the man's flowing robes. Lost among the crowd was a new face. Berthold had decided to visit the earth for the first time. Arriving at the same time as the gods, the sight of the milling throng of people piqued his interest, and he would join them. As the breeze blew at the man's robes, Berthold noticed the shoes did not match the rest of the ensemble. They were the same type of shoes as the other speaker had worn. Looking down at the variety of footwear people were wearing, he saw many that would have been more appropriate with the man's ornate apparel. Curious, he caused a slight increase in the breeze. The cuff of trousers displayed also were of the same rough material as worn by the first speaker. Berthold grinned as he blew a blast that stripped away the robes and masks. The man stood revealed as having been both speakers. Don began to laugh, which brought the others to the window. Gladys saw the man and recognized him. She sensed the people were making ready to attack him for his deceit. She appeared by his side, as did the other gods. This man is not at fault for his actions. I peered into his spirit. He was under Karen's spell when he caused you to pray to her and to work without ceasing. He was her voice and had no control. I released the man that he was before. She took over his soul. He no longer has any of her within him, and you cannot punish him, for he is no longer the man he was. The people heard, but were not convinced. They also did not fear Gladys, or for that matter, any of the gods. Gladys saw the people's angrily climbing onto the stage and placed the man behind her. Here he sent God and man to the penthouse, while he and the other gods prepared to meet the onslaught. Brandishing sticks and stones, the people circled the gods, ready to destroy those who had made them and all they had. Gary held them at bay momentarily as Peter raced through them, collecting their weapons. Don was angry, as only a god could be, and making no effort to hide his anger. His anger produced a storm that was matched by one Ashhead was also creating. Tornadoes, lightning, and a thunderstorm swept the area, destroying buildings, scattering livestock. The people were swept up into the winds and flung over the entire continent. Gary, Gary, seeing the devastation they had created, was about to set everything back, but was stopped by Don and Peter. They want things better. They know what to do and who to call. They cast angry looks all around them while people cowered from their wrath. With a flash of light and a thunderous boom, the gods left the stage and appeared in Gladys's office. She stared wide-eyed at the devastation. Ash stood before her imperious in his Ash stood before her imperious in his righteous anger. People wanted us to act like the gods of old. Well, they got what they wanted. They may fear us, but their love will be magnified because they will desire our loving kindness and want to avoid our anger. He spun on his heel and sat at the table with the others, joining them to continue their discussion. Morris was seated as well near Gladys. As they talked, he held the contract Don had tossed on the table. Well, the people have got what they wanted. They've seen the angry side of us, and maybe they will start giving us the respect again. I don't see how that helps us with volunteers for the population of Earth 2, though. Peter shrugged and walked around. As he passed Morris, he was grasped by him, and the contract held up for him to see. Morris's hands were shaking in his excitement. Sir, didn't you state that you were going there? Peter pointed down. Not me, him. Morse approached Don and bowing showed him the contract. My God, go now, and the deed is accomplished. Don took the contract, trying to understand what Morse meant. He looked over from the contract to the second Earth, now closer than ever. He grinned as he snapped his fingers and was gone. The other gods gathered together, hovering over the contract, trying to see what they had missed. Morris again pointed to the section stating, the god named Don has gone to Earth Mark II, and the planet is now has a population of one. Now one of you can put together the ship and fly it to ME2 with a single object. You hand it to Don, and he gives you something in return from EM2. You bring it back, and bang, the contract's been fulfilled. Peter disappeared and reappeared at the launch site. He needed no assistance to put the rocket together. Glass created the fuel to propel it. Larry monitored the computer guidance system, and Gary bought a pineapple as a trading object. Peter entered the cockpit, and the rocket burst off the platform in a plume of smoke and fire. On orbs over all the world were shown the launch and flight of the rocket. As they approached the planet, they were amazed at how it was shown. Then it had worked miracles, and there was a fairly fully functioning city ready and waiting. Plenty of food already grown, cattle and sheep without number, fountains that spewed water, and some had wine flowing. It was a terrestrial paradise, and the people cursed themselves that they had not gone on the flight. On the view were shown the rocket landing, Peter handing out a pineapple to Don. Don passed over a flagon of wine to Peter. Trade had been established between those two worlds. From the moment the rocket landed, there were plenty of people waiting to be taken to populate the waiting city. The people gratefully prayed to the gods to win their favor and procure themselves seats. Peter installed a crew who had remained at Larry's Island and had trained to pilot the ship. As long as possible, it was continually lifting off, flying between planets and returning. People came and went in a continual flood of transient and visitors. Once every 50 years on both planets was a day of remembrance where the gods let loose with a burst of destructive energy. They would immediately repair the damage, but left enough damage for the people to repair. In this way, the people were reminded of what would happen should they incur the wrath of their gods. In gratitude, the people prayed and offered reverence so that the gods and people would remain in balance until the end of time. Final chapter, at the end of time again. Fred and Dionysus were at the club chatting with Berthold and waiting out for the final destruction of the Earths. The remaining population was being ferried to the facility and shown around. The facility had changed again since Dionysus was in charge. The spirits were now allowed to retain their humanity. There were now parks, forests, and animals with birds. People could indulge in hobbies and learn crafts. They could still work, but were allowed plenty of free time to eat, drink, and be merry. The remaining spirits of Earth joined their fellows for the interim to wait out their time in joy and splendor and happiness. They could even pray to their chosen gods if they chose to, and if enough prayed, the god would appear and perform miracles for their amusement. Fred, Dionysus, and the gods of Earth were having a celebration at the club presided over by Berthold, who was now a celebrant since he was also a god in part now. A notice came for Fred, Dio, and company to present themselves in front of the universal god to be awarded their just deserts. Berthold congratulated them all, and when they left, he cleaned up the mess with a wave of his hand. In his office, he took the goblet he had received from the gods, still full of the god essence they had taken from themselves to give to him. He placed it in his place of honor on the top center shelf. An ethereal smile of warmth and benevolence wreathed his face as he looked on the token of the new earth god's benevolence. Turning around, he dusted off the desk, tucked in the chair, and became a ball of light that slowly faded. In the center was a combination view of someone who looked a bit like Berthold and a person who looked like a prosperous banker. The ball of light was headed to his other office as the persona of the universal God. He had just thought of an interesting challenge for the next iteration. So that's it. That is Gods and More Gods. We have just finished up. And I'll tell you, I'm going to kind of miss these readings because I've enjoyed them. But we're done with that one, so the next one's going to be Dark Soul Man, the Healed Avenger. I look forward to starting that one in a few days and hope you'll be around to listen in on it. Can't think of anything else. By the way, if you look around and you find my beard and mustache, please let me know because I've lost the damn thing and it's going to take me a while to get it back. So that's it for today. Again, thank you for visiting. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you again. Be good.